Welcome in the Bhansu class to learn one more new chapter based on square numbers. But before we learn that, let me quickly ask you one question to think of. And the question is, which of the following numbers would have units place as 1 and units place as 6? You can see few numbers 19 squared, 24 squared, 161 squared. When you will square these numbers, which of these will have units place as 1 and which of these will have units place as 6? Do you know the answer to this question? And do you know how to find it? If you don't know, then don't worry, because this is something we are going to master today in this video only. Okay, so let's quickly get a mastery over three things: square numbers, perfect squares, and properties of perfect square. Okay, so now we will quickly talk about square numbers. So what are square numbers? So number multiplied by number is equal to number square. So here we multiply the number by itself. Now n times n is equal to n square. So let's say if n is 5, then 5 times 5 is equal to 5 square, which is equals to 25. So 25 is a square number. So now we can even find the square of a decimal number. For example, 0.5 multiplied by 0.5, which is going to be 0.25, which is also a square number. Now here the power is 2 because I am multiplying the number by itself. Now what if I am multiplying by itself 2 times? Now what is going to be the power? The power is going to be 3. What if the question is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5? In this case, this is going to be 5 to the power of 4. Is that clear? Now we will quickly go ahead and we will see what are perfect squares. The perfect squares are the squares of natural numbers. Now we can see that this is square of 1. This is square of 2. 2 times 2 gives us 4. 3 times 3 gives us 9. 4 times 4 gives us 16. So the square of natural numbers are the perfect square. Now I hope you remember that 0.5 times 0.5, which is 0.25, which is actually a square number. But the question is it a perfect square? Of course not. This is not a perfect square because this is not a square of natural number. Now what if I ask you about 121? Is it a perfect square? Then of course yes. Why? Because this is a square of 11. 11 times 11 is 11 square, which is equal to 121. So 121 is a perfect square. Now you must have observed the pattern, that is odd square number is equals to odd number only and the square of even number is even number only. For example, if I ask you the square of 3, that is 9. If I ask you the square of 5, that is 25. So square of odd number is odd number only. And if I ask you the square of even number, for example, square of 4, that is 16. Square of 6 is 36. The square of even number is even number. So isn't it an interesting observation? Yes. Now we will quickly observe one more thing. That is the numbers that ends with 1 or 9, their square ends with 1 only. Do you want to check it with few numbers? Let's check it. Okay. Let's say 1 square is 1, right? 9 square is 81. If I say 11 square is 121, right? If I write 19 square, that is 361. All the numbers that ends with 1 and 9, their squares are ending with 1, right? Now we will check with the numbers that ends with 4 or 6. Their square ends in 6. So let's check with few numbers. For example, 4 square is 16, 6 square is 36 and 14 square is 196 or 16 square is 256. Isn't it? The numbers that are ending with 4 and 6, their squares ends with 6 only. Now let's talk about the numbers that ends with 3 and 7. Okay, so shall we check it? 3 square is 9, 7 square is 49 and 13 square is 169, and if we say 17 square, that is 289. So we can see that these are ending with 9 only. And let's check with the numbers that ends with 2 and 8. So let's check it. 2 square is 4, 8 square is 64, 12 square is 144 and 18 square is 324. Did you notice that? The numbers that ends with 2 and 8, their squares ends with 4 only. And what about the numbers that ends with 5? Let's check it. So the numbers that ends with 5, their square ends with 5 only. 5 square is 15, 15 square is 225. Did you understand that? Right? And now we will quickly go ahead and check that what about the square numbers that ends with 0? Let's quickly check it then. So here, if we have just one 0 at the last of a number, for example, the number is 10, let's say the number is 30, let's say the number is 80, then the square of that number will end with 2 zeros. Do you see it here? 10 square is 100, 30 square is 900, 80 square is 6400. And what if the number ends with 2 zeros? Then its square will end with 4 zeros. Now do you see it here in these numbers? Yes. What if I ask you the number that ends with 3 zeros? Okay, and you have to find the square of it. Then what do you think? How many zeros will be there in its square? There will be 6 zeros. That is the double of 3. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did you notice we have 6 zeros? Now we will go ahead and we will think about the question that we started initially. So here you need to tell me, if you find the square of these numbers, then which of these numbers will end at 1 or will end at 6? Let's check it. You can also check with the last digit. Now you know that 9 square is 81, right? So this is definitely going to end at 1. So here the units place is going to be 1. What about 24? 4 square is 16. So this is going to end at 6, right? So I will write 24 square over here. Similarly, 161 square will be here and 26 square will be here. What about 123 square? 3 square is 9. This is going to end at 9. So this does not come under any of these. So I am going to cross it. If I talk about 77 square, 7 square is 49. This is also going to end with 9 and this is not been asked, right? So 82 square, 2 square is 4. This ends at 4. So this is also not asked. And then 9 square is 81. This is ending with 1. So I'll be writing 109 square over here. Did you understand? Yes, and this was easy also, right? Now we will quickly practice few more questions, and it says find the perfect square number between 30 and 40, and we know that that is 36 only, which is actually a square of 6. 6 times 6 is 36. And if you check the square of 5, that is 25. If you check the square of 7, that is 49. So there is only one perfect square between 30 and 40, which is 36. Is that clear? Yeah. So let's move ahead with the next practice question, which says which of the following numbers may be a square number? Now we know that the numbers that ends with 3 and 7, their squares ends with 9. The number that ends with 5, their square ends with 5. The numbers that ends with 1 and 9, their square ends with 1. The number that ends with 2 and 8, their square ends with 4. And we can see that the last digit is 7. So no square number ends with 7. No square number ends with 8. No square number ends with 2. So only the last number that you can see over here the units place is 1. Only this number may be a square number. Is that clear? Yes. Now we will quickly go ahead with the next practice question. What will be the number of zeros in the square of the following numbers? Now 60 has 1 zero, so its square will have 2 zeros, right? So we can write here 2 zeros, and if you have to find the square of this number, that is going to be 3600. Now the square of 400, now we can see that here we have 2 zeros, so square will have 4 zeros, okay, and its square is actually going to be 16 with 4 zeros, so that means 1,60,000, right? So here the answer is going to be 4 zeros, right? Now we will quickly go ahead with the next question. It says the square of which of the following number would be an odd or an even number? Now this is an odd number, so its square will also be odd, right? And here this is an even number, so its square will be even. Is that clear? This was easy question, very easy, and I hope you understood everything, and we will quickly summarize what we did. First of all, we discussed what are square numbers, right? So number multiplied by number is equals to number square. Then we talked about perfect square like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36 and so on. So these are perfect squares. And then we talked about the properties of perfect square, that perfect square ends with what digit, right? We talked about this. Also we talked about the square of odd numbers. We talked about the square of even numbers. Square of odd number will be odd only, square of even number will be even only. The numbers that ends with 3 and 7, their square ends with 9. The numbers that ends with 5, their square ends with 5. And the numbers that ends with 1 and 9, their square ends with 1. And the number that ends with 2 and 8, their square ends with 4. And we also discussed that the number of zeros in the square can also be found from the number of zeros in the number for which we are finding the square. For example, if we are finding the square of 50, it has 1 zero, so its square will have 2 zeros, right? If we are finding the square of 500, here it has 2 zeros, so its square will have 4 zeros. So these are all the properties that we have figured out of perfect squares. And this is not enough. There are many more things to learn. And do you know that some of the great mathematical minds in the history, they have been mesmerized by these symmetries and connections that square numbers reveal. So in our next video, we will uncover these secrets, and I'm very sure that you won't want to miss that class, right? Till that time, take care of yourself, and we will learn more things in the next video. Bye-bye.